Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Darkling, which is episode 18 of season 3 of Star Trek Voyager. I'm being evil, like the evil doctor. Oh my god. Anyway, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Darkling, which is episode 18 of season 3 of Star Trek Voyager. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as determined by my user polls. The episode to win my latest user poll for Voyager is the episode Darkling. Now, usually I put out these user polls. I choose 5 episodes at random, and then I have a poll, and viewerships of my show, of my channel, will vote on which episode they'd like me to review, and I do like doing that way. I think it's fun. Now, most of the time, the episode that wins the poll is, generally a good episode, because I give my feelings on the episodes that are in the poll so people know exactly what to expect from my reviews, because I don't want anyone to think, oh, I love this episode, let me review it, and then I review it and I completely trash it. So I want to give them warning how I feel about it, and I made my feelings on this episode very clear that I think this episode is terrible. I think this is one of the worst episodes of Voyager. In fact, I believe this is in my top 5 worst episodes of all of Voyager. And, sometimes that's what people want to see. They want to see me trash an episode or review a bad episode that I don't like. So here we go. Review the Voyager episode of Darkling. Now, I know when I put these reviews in a playlist, I put them in order of air date and of when the episodes were released, and I do plan on doing something in the future where I'm going to release every all my reviews for all these Star Trek episodes in order, because, as I make them, I do them completely out of order. So anyone who would watch that playlist in that manner, who would watch all my Season 3 Voyager reviews, would probably be sick of hearing my feelings on Season 3, because I feel like I bring it up every time I review an episode of Season 3, but I'm just reminded every time I watch a Season 3 Voyager episode that this is, by far the worst season of Voyager, and I'm amazed that not many people feel that way. Most people go to Season 2, but Season 2 had not more. I would say it had maybe just as much horrible episodes. But the overall feel of Season 2, I think, was good. Even through some of the horrible episodes, it still had that sense of community. And it had a lot of great episodes and a lot of good episodes as well. And you really feel that sense. Whereas Season 3, I don't think it doesn't have nearly as many good episodes. It has just as many, I would argue, more terrible episodes. But moreover, you have no sense of the writers had any idea what they were doing. That you have a sense that they were just making shit up on the fly, and there was no structure. That the writers' room was chaos. That's what I get from watching Season 3. When I watch Season 2, even the Tuviks and the Thresholds or what have you, there were definitely fumbles, but I still get a sense that there's some harmony in the writer's room, whereas in Season 3, it's well documented that they kind of scrapped their plans for Season 3 at the last second. They axed Michael Piller, which is the worst thing they could have possibly done, because Michael Piller is by far the best writer of Star Trek and the best thing that ever happened to Star Trek. If there's any... And, you can praise Gene Roddenberry for creating Star Trek, but if there's any person you want to praise for creating the 90s iteration of Star Trek, that is, or making it, not creating it, but elevating it, making it something memorable and excellent, it would be Michael Piller, and he doesn't always do good. Not every episode he writes a champion, and some of it, he thought Prophet and Lace would be an amazing episode. So I don't agree with every decision he's ever made, but I still think that he's the best writer and the best thing that ever happened to Star Trek. And getting rid of him resulted in this horrible, horrible season. And not only did they get rid of him, they got rid of him at the last second. And like, they told, in Basics Part 2, the first episode of Season 3, they told Seska, right before they shot the scene, they told the actress who played Seska that they're going to kill her off. That's how chaotic this was. Now, granted, they weren't going by this. This is towards the later end of Season 3. They weren't kind of going by the seat of their pants by this, but they had no direction. And thus we get crap like this. Now, another thing I feel obligated to talk about is the Trilogy of Terror, because it is a common. In fact, you look it up on Memory Alpha online, it will even have a thing about the Trilogy of Terror. Apparently, is a somewhat common agreement amongst the fans that there's 3 episodes in Season 3, which is funny that they chose Season 3 of Voyager, because most people, unlike me, actually think it's a decent season. I've actually heard the opinion that Voyager got better in Season 3. I was like, what? Anyway, that opinion is objectively wrong, but that's another topic. Anyway, regardless, there's a common agreement amongst a lot of fans that there's 3 episodes in a row in Season 3 that are absolutely terrible, which they refer to as the Trilogy of Terror. Now, the official Trilogy of Terror it starts with this episode, then the next episode, Rise, and then the episode after that, Favorite Son. Now, I've stated this before, and I will state it again. I refer to that as the fake Trilogy of Terror, because that's not the real Trilogy of Terror. Absolutely not. Because, well, first of all, this is the only episode that actually belongs in the fake Trilogy of Terror. It's the only episode that's actually really terrible that remotes that. But Rise, I completely disagree with the common consensus as a terrible episode. I actually like that episode. I think it's a good episode. Now, granted, I don't think it's amazing. Like, I'm not going to give it a 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. I would give it a 7 out of 10. So it's not the best thing ever, but it doesn't belong in any Trilogy of Terror. Granted, the plot of Rise is very cliche and stereotypical, but it has really great. I think it's the best character episode as far as the relationship between Tuvok and Nelix Cass. Or maybe second best, because you have Riddles in Season 6. But it's one of the best as far as the relationship between Nelix and Tuvok goes, and I love the character interactions, even though the plot was kind of weak and cliche. So I disagree that was a terrible episode. And then the other episode in the fake Trilogy of Terror is Favorite Son, which, don't get me wrong, not a good episode. I would not claim it to be a good episode, but it's not the worst. It's not near as bad as some of these other episodes in Season 3. So for clarity's sake, I would give Favorite Son a 4 out of 10, which is still a negative rating. But most of these other episodes in Season 3, I would give a 1 or 2 out of 10. So, I might have, if you see my other videos, you might have heard me state this before, but let me lay out the real Trilogy of Terror of Season 3 of Voyager, and that is Coda. It starts with Alter Ego, then Coda, then Blood Fever. That is the real Trilogy of Terror, because Coda and Alter Ego both get 1 out of 10s for me, and Blood Fever gets a 2 out of 10. So arguably Blood Fever is slightly better than those other two, and I've already done my review for Coda, where I couldn't believe how many people thought, oh, that episode's just mediocre, Mark. No, it's not. It's one of the worst written episodes in all of Star Trek. And I haven't reviewed Alter Ego yet, but I talked about it in some of my other videos and how it's just a terrible imitation of Fatal Attraction, which was a bad and troublesome movie to begin with, and it's just terrible. And that combined with Blood Fever, which I'm not gonna get into Blood Fever. That's the real Trilogy of Terror. Those are 3 terrible episodes in a row. You put the fake Trilogy of Terror is one terrible episode, one good episode, and one somewhat average, slightly bad episode. That's not a Trilogy of Terror. You got Alter Ego, terrible, terrible, terrible. Coda, one of the worst written episodes in all of Star Trek. And Blood Fever, maybe not quite as bad as the first two, but still a really terrible episode. That's the real Trilogy of Terror. Sorry. I just had to bring that up. In fact, I always wanted to put this in the Trilogy of Terror and make it a quadruple of Terror, but this episode is separated from the real Trilogy of Terror by the episode, what's it called? Unity, which comes right before that. And Unity is actually a really good episode. It's one of the best episodes of season 3. So that kind of fucks up my thing. But you could say there's 4 out of 5 episodes that are absolutely terrible, going from Alter Ego, Coda, Blood Fever, skip Unity, and go straight to this episode, Darkling. But I don't know what you would call that. The 4 out of 5 itty of terror, whatever. Anyway, let's get into why I think this episode is so terrible. So, as I alluded to with my intro there, I think Robert Picardo's performance here is atrocious. It is laughable. It is laughably bad in an episode that actually wants you to take it seriously. And to be fair to Picardo, the script is terrible as well. So they weren't really giving him gold to play with. Now, I will admit that I'm not a fan of horror, and perhaps that colors my opinion of this episode, because they were clearly going for a horror-esque episode. But there are horror-esque episodes of Trek that I do like. Even the one a bit earlier this season, Macrocosm, I actually thought that was a decent episode, although that was kind of a horror action. But yeah, this is just terrible. It's they say they don't. It's a reference that some people refer to as they don't really know what tone they're going for. Is this like a cheesy schlock, or is it a seriously supposed to be a scary, serious episode? And I feel like when I watch this episode that the intention behind the creators were to make a scary horror episode with no cheese or schlock, but the result is an absolutely cheesy schlocky, poorly written, poorly acted piece of crap. Now, and that's what's worse, because if they actually, you have your, it's not really my style, but you have your certain kind of horror or whatever where they don't really take themselves seriously. It's just meant to be silly, which I never got into that myself. But that's not what this is. You can, what's worse, the kind of things where you can tell they're actually going for something serious, that's way worse than the ones that are actually intentionally being silly, because you can tell. But anyway, so the premise of this episode is that the doctor's working on improving his holographic program by integrating like personality traits from historical figures. Like you see him talking to Gandhi and some English Lord Byron, or I can't even remember, and other, like, they even have T'Pol Vulcan, which is the only person, alien that's not from Earth. Which, come on, Doctor, expand your freaking horizons. Why are you focusing so much on Earth? Because, of course, we're the audience. And T'Pol, of course, is something that the audience is familiar with, because she was in the episode Amok Time from the original series. And in fact, I did not catch that reference until just now. I didn't realize, because I thought it was just some random Vulcan. I guess I wasn't remembering it very clearly. But I recently watched Amok Time, and not too long ago I watched the Enterprise Vulcan trilogy of episodes that they had, Kier Shara and all that, where they have a younger version of T'Pol in it, and I was like, oh, this is T'Pol, the one who appeared in Amok Time, and I had no idea that she was one of the holographic figures here. Anyway, premise of this episode is the Doctor's integrating all these historical figures into his program to improve his program, and ends up having a negative side effect because all these, he didn't filter out their traits. He just put in all the traits of these historical figures, which includes all the negative sides of them, and all these negative. Sorry, I can't say this without laughing. All the negative sides of their personalities end up creating an alternate ego within the Doctor, kind of a Dr. Hyde, was it Mr. Jekyll situation, where this totally separate personality emerges and takes over the Doctor's program and goes around like killing people or whatever. And you can tell he's evil because his hair is messy and his eyes are like this and he talks like this. I'm sorry, but he's a hologram, so why is the hologram's hair like messy and eyes bloodshot all of a sudden? In fact, I was reading the production thing, and they said they even gave him some fake teeth. You know what they forgot to give him? They forgot to give him the big curly mustache. The one that he could twirl. That's what they forgot it. I know that was someone was like, it was on the plan for that day. Someone had arranged it a costume. They forgot it. That was their fuck up. You're missing the twirly mustache that he can twirl. Because it was so stereotypical, cliche, evil. Now, I feel like I need to make one thing very clear right now. I like Robert Picardo. In fact, I once named him one of the best actors in Star Trek, and I stand by that. Usually he gives an amazing performance, but I can see like this is outside of his range, or maybe it was just a terrible director, or combined with the fact that this writing is so terrible. Because I was reading behind the scenes stuff about it, and he and other people involved that actually think this is a good episode, and they're completely oblivious to the schlock that they created. And he said that he felt like his theory, he doesn't know this for sure, but his theory was that Brenna Braga and Joe Manasky wrote this episode for him because they saw the movie The Howling, in which he played sort of a horrific figure, and The Howling apparently was one of their favorite movies. Now, I never really saw that or got into that. It came out when I was too young, and as I said, I was never really into horror. Maybe that's true, but I haven't seen the movie, so I can imagine that his performance was as terrible as it was here. And maybe it actually fit this mood and tone and story of that movie better, because here it's just like, alright, but as I said, like the whole premise of having, like that's I reject that premise. That premise does not make any sense. Just because, alright, so the holograms they're creating of Gandhi and all these historical figures are based off of historical documents, books, whatnot. And then, of course, the computer would try to take personal information like journals and whatnot and extrapolate the clearest, most accurate simulation of this person that they possibly could. But it's not going to be completely accurate. They don't read their minds. They don't know exactly how their mind works. They couldn't possibly duplicate every single function and thought and way that these people operated. Therefore, I reject the premise that there's this dark side that the Doctor didn't account for, because I don't believe the computer would be able to create that in the first place. But even if you say, well, I don't agree, I think that's part's wrong. I think because they say, for example, like the T'Pau Vulcan, they said that she was very aggressive and dogmatic in her logic, and so that negative aspect could be interpreted, and that's something they could have gleaned from historical records. So sure, but the fact that it would alter the Doctor's program in such a way to create an alternate personality that goes around killing people, It's the dumbest thing ever. I absolutely, totally reject that premise full force with all my might. It is one of the worst written episodes because you know what happened. Like in the writer's room, in fact, someone pitched the idea. They bought the story. They pitched the idea of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde version on Star Trek. So you know what happened. That's what the writers who wrote this episode. And I have my issue. You know, Joe Manowski and Brennan Breaker can do great. They've written some of my favorite episodes. They've also written a lot of crap. So, and they have their faults. And this is also definitely one of them. But you can tell that the writers got this episode or this premise, like the Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde. They just got the premise, so they had to try to backwards engineer. All right, how do we work out? How do we make a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story in Star Trek? And so this is the best they could come up with, and it doesn't work. Like, they came up with this bullshit. Oh, let's say the doctor's experimenting with these impersonators, but it has a negative side effect or it creates an alternate personality. That's all you could come up with? Yeah, because it's a stupid premise they should have never done in the first place. And honestly, that this is what the BS explanation they came to get to it, I don't think they even put in enough effort into it. So, I mean, here's the thing. Like, I could understand, like, the negative aspects of these personalities integrating into this hologram having a negative effect. But it would be done, like, earlier in the episode, which I actually kind of like this scene, to be honest, when the doctor is, like, examining B'Elanna and some of these personalities are affecting him. And he starts, like, you know, touching her stomach. He's like, does this feel good? And getting in her face. He's like, doctor, what the fuck is wrong with you? I'm going to kick your ass. Like, I'm going to hurt you if you don't back the fuck off. So that I buy. Like, that would be a realistic negative side effect from integrating those personalities. But then when they took it to the next step, where it creates a totally different personality, where they refer to it as two personalities inhabiting the same hologram, and he actually takes over and wants to kill the other doctor, and the fact that he's, you know, mustache twirly, over the top cliche evil. No. Absolutely, positively, 100% do not, never will buy that. It is a ridiculous, stupid premise. So, alright. So let's get into the Cass of it all before I continue any further. This episode was the first episode where they confirmed that Cass and Nelix are broken up, and they have to, because the whole point of this episode is to have Cass be in this romance with this lovely guy, and like a very he reminded me of the Outrageous Okana, like the very stereotypical romance, you know, the kind of cliche two-dimensional male character that would appear in a romance novel, something that is like stereotypically what older women would fantasize and what they would want an adventurous, brash young man to be. So that's Jesus. But anyway, this is the first episode that, because Doctor says to Cass in a random line, it's like, oh, after your recent breakup with Mr. Nelix. And I remember watching this episode when it first came out. I'm like, what? What breakup? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I've even had people come to me and ask, like, so when did Nelix and Cass actually break up? Because I don't remember this. But I was able to deduce that what they were referring to, in fact, Memory Alpha is kind of hazy on this, like they don't even know themselves. But I deduced that what they were referring to is the episode Warlord, when Cass was taken over by this like warlord, like, you know, this evil guy inhabited her body and was taken over her body. And of course, he was sick of Nelix crushing on him, and I was like, God damn it! And of course he would be, and so he broke up with him. But of course, Nelix didn't know at the time that Cass was, you know, inhabited by another being, so he took it as Cass breaking up. But I was like, really? That's the breakup? Because that wasn't even Cass that did it. She was like, I don't even know if she'd even remember doing that because it wasn't her. It was some dude inhabiting her body. But apparently it lasts. Either that, see, Memory Alpha says, is kind of torn between two possibilities. It's saying that that's one possibility. The other possibility is just it happens sometime off screen in between the two episodes. But I take it as the Warlord one because that's the only thing we actually saw on screen to indicate that these two broke up. And you know, I don't want to get into the whole Cass and Nelix thing, but I still love their relationship. I liked it. I mean, Nelix being jealous and attacking Tom Paris aside, that shit was dumb. But stuff like the episode Jatrell, where I thought their relationship was really, and there's other parts throughout seasons 1 and 2 where I thought the relationship was really strong. So I wasn't happy with them breaking the two up. And moreover, like, they only did it, and plus the way they did it, like off screen or some warlord inhabiting her body, was bullshit. This is a important relationship in the show. They should have, if they were going to separate them, they should have made it more clear. And so it makes it clear to me that it was done simply because they wanted to up Cass's sex appeal. Now, this is something I also talk about and why I don't like season 3 of Voyager, because the writers, Cass was a very interesting character in the first 2 seasons. She was very young, and it was this weird alien that only lives for 9 years. That's something you gotta remember. She's not 2 years old. She's in her 20s as far as human years goes. Actually, by the time this episode, she's in her 30s. But anyway, leaving that aside, she was portrayed as a very interesting, like, even though she was young, she had this wisdom to her, and she had these telepathic abilities and they had the stuff when Tuvok would mentor her to explore her telepathic abilities. So I loved her relationship with Tuvok. And then she was also wanting to become a nurse, and maybe, you know, she was a nurse. She was wanting to become a doctor and studying under the doctor, and that she was sort of his advocate for his rights when other people wouldn't give him rights at first because he was just a hologram. Like, she was a very interesting character. But season 3, particularly with episodes like this, I think this is one of the worst examples of it. But then you got like stuff like Before and After, which is also absolutely horrible episode, that continued this downgrade of her character. Season 3 decided to pretty much throw all that out the window and make her try to amp up the sex appeal. Now, I believe this had something to do with the pressure under the studio producers to up the sex appeal of the show, which, as you know, at the end of season 3, starting season 4, resulted in her getting axed entirely and being replaced with 7 of 9, which is a lot more obvious because Cass wasn't sexy enough, so they had to replace her with 7 of 9. Anyway, so it was obvious to me that they wanted to treat her more like a sex object rather than the intelligent, interesting character she had with these unique telepathic abilities and this interest to learn and become a doctor and have a wholesome relationship with Nelix, who, you know, I'm sorry, but she's in her late 20s and he's in his 30s. There's not a big of an age difference there. You got to take Ocampan years into account. Don't say that your dog who's 12 years old or 14 years old is a teenager. It's not a teenager, he's a senior. Cass only lives to be 9 years old. Like, who do you expect her to date? Do you expect her to date other 5-year-olds? She's obviously way past puberty and she's into her late 20s. But anyway, I'm sorry. let me get over that. Anyway, so you take away that wholesome relationship. You take away the unique telepathic abilities. You take away her striving to become a doctor, and you just have her hang out with these handsome men. And in this episode, she even talked about leaving Voyager, her whole family, everything she knew, to go off gallivanting around the galaxy with this handsome man. And On top of that, you got the Doctor crushing on her. It's not bad enough. It's bad enough that they had Tom Paris crushing off of her in season 1 and 2, which is something I thought they would left behind, but then that stupid before and after episode brought it back. That was total bullshit. Now they have the Doctor crushing after her. Why are you trying to turn her into a sexy... you notice how she has long hair all of a sudden, too. Because it's more sexy. It's obvious they're trying to ramp up her sex appeal and ignoring the complex uniqueness of her character. And that bothers the fuck out of me. And as I said, like, to me, like, apparently it was between her and Harry Kim of who they were going to cut from the show. And to me, they made the best decision to cut Cass because season 3 completely destroyed and ruined her character. Now, granted, the episode The Gift actually did justice to her character. So in season 4 was an amazing season in contrast to season 3. So I have no doubt had they kept her, they actually would have been able to restore and revitalize her character and do her justice again. But unfortunately, by this time it was too late. They've already ruined her. So anyway, so this episode has Cass being the handsome, outrageous O'Connor, whatever the fuck that random guy is, who is such a cliche stereotype and not a real person. She's crushing on him, and this makes the Doctor jealous. And it's very obvious. Like, some people might argue, well, I don't think the Doctor's crushing on Cass. He's just looking after her because he has this fatherly mentor figure. No, watching this episode very clearly, the Doctor is crushing on Cass. He's clearly, they make it very clear that he's being irrationally jealous of her. And that's why, he takes the handsome man and tries to kill him. He throws him off a cliff. To me, that's extreme. It's not because he thinks that he's bad for Cass. No, it's because he's fucking jealous. And because he tries to kidnap and abduct Cass and take her away because he wants her. That's what this episode is saying, and that bothers the hell out of me. That's so dumb. That's the last thing that we freaking need. And like, even before, like, let me differentiate between the mustache twirly evil Doctor and the real Doctor, because even before he got mustache twirly, the actual Doctor was the one being a jealous asshole and obviously being a dick to Cass when she's like being polite and, oh, Doctor, can you help me with this? And he's like, oh, why are you hanging out with that guy? What is your problem? You're immature, blah, blah, blah. And it was obvious that he was just being jealous. And I hate that. I think that it's absolutely terrible. Now, since we're on the topic of Cass, though, I will say there is one scene in this episode that is kind of good. It's kind of good. That almost made me think about giving this a 2 instead of a 1, but I don't think it saves it that much. Where Cass and Janeway are talking, and Janeway is being a really loving, mentor-esque, mother-esque figure to Cass and understanding, because Cass is saying, look, I understand, I love you guys, you're my family, but I've spent a third of my life already on Voyager, and I want to experience more. And Janeway is in contrast to the Doctor being a jealous asshole, Janeway was sort of very understanding and like, look, I can't tell you what to do. You have to do what's best. I understand, and I can relate to being at a crossroads. This is, in my opinion, because the writing throughout the entire 7 seasons of Voyager is very inconsistent as far as Janeway is concerned. I think different writers had different ideas on how to write her, and for me, as terrible as season 3 is, this is one of the best examples of writing Janeway correctly. Like, this is how she should come off as someone very understanding, someone very wise, and someone who came off as very caring towards Cass. So I actually do kind of like that scene, but that's the only saving grace on this episode. And in fact, it's surrounded by the fact that she wants to leave Voyager to hang out with a handsome man and just go off in random parts of the galaxy, which I don't buy. So even that scene is based off of a very flawed premise. So anyway, let's get back to the Doctor being evil. I am the Doctor. I'm the evil Doctor because I have messy hair and I talk like this. It hurts my throat to talk like that. I don't know how Picard does it. It's so cheesy. It is such a terrible performance. But anyway, you had the scene where he's torturing B'Elanna, which, I mean, it is a bit of a creepy scene, but it's thrown off by his cheesy performance. I can't buy it. He's like, well, you're gonna do what I say or I'll hurt you. And I'm like, all right, just stop it. Just stop it. So in other words, I think that this scene actually could have been effectively creepy, scary, and horrific if performed correctly, which it absolutely was not. And so then Cass finds like B'Elanna in a coma or whatever, unconscious, and she goes to look for the Doctor, and she goes and the computer says, oh, the Doctor's in the hologram, and he's in that stupid resort. And don't get me started on that stupid resort program. I've talked about it enough. Anyway, he's hanging out in the resort program in the holodeck, and there's all these holodeck characters that are like kind of like blinking out, and then they're mutilated, and you see the evil Doctor because his hair's fucked up, and you see the evil Doctor. He's still missing his mustache, but anyway, you see the evil Doctor standing over the holograms, like fucking with them, and it's meant to be like a horrific scene. It seems like the music and the way Cass reacts, it seems like that he's like chopping up bodies and mutilating them. But, you know, I don't know, not to sound too callous about holograms, because I do respect the Doctor as a hologram, but he's a sentient hologram. These are just like computer generated images based off of historical records. So I don't see it as horrific. And I think, again, I almost find it amusingly cheesy that the episode's trying to play it off as if this is some like horrific nightmare that she's walked into. He's just fucking around with the holodeck. Like, if Harry Kim and Tom Paris were on the holodeck and they were casually doing this, I wouldn't think anything of it. I was like, oh, they're trying to tweak the hologram programs. Like, what's the big deal? Anyway, so then you have he abducts Cass and takes her down. I'm just thinking of the scene where he's in a transporter room, and he has his back turned to her so many times. It seems like she could easily get away if she tried. But anyway, he's like, no, and she's trying to, oh, there's still good in you, Doctor, I believe. And she's like, no, there's no good. You come with me, I'll kill you. And beams her down to the planet. And then Chakotay and Tuvok beam down, and they try to talk sense to the evil Doctor, and he and then Cass tries to convince him that he does care about her, and he's like, no, I don't care, and he throws her off a cliff, but that allows them to beam them up on the bridge, and as soon as they're beamed up, the Doctor's back to his normal self. And of course everyone kind of laughs it off and like, ho. Now the Doctor did apologize to B'Elanna for fucking with this program and resulted in the evil version of him torturing her, which, okay, at least they acknowledge that, but still it's kind of like back to the status quo. Whatever. Alright, so one more thing I gotta talk about. There's this other cheesy guy who runs a tapper, but he's not the handsome guy. He's the dastardly evil guy. Well, not evil, but like the shady guy. Anyway, at the start of the episode, the whole episode begins with him telling a story to Janeway about how when he was researching or looking for resources, he went to his moon and he realized that it wasn't a moon at all, that it was a creature, that the whole thing was alive. And I kept thinking to myself, well, I'm glad that even 500 years in the future, 400 or so years in the future, and on the other side of the galaxy in the Delta Quadrant, that they have the Empire Strikes Back. Now, granted, okay, it's not the exact same thing as The Empire Strikes Back, because The Empire Strikes Back, it wasn't the whole asteroid that was alive. The Millennium Falcon went into a cavern, and that they thought it was a cave, but it turned out they went inside a creature or whatever. So it's not the same thing. It's different, but it's similar enough. Where I was just thinking, yeah, when he was telling the story, it's like, yeah, I've seen The Empire Strikes Back too. Anyway, and that guy was really cheesy too. How just because that handsome guy came by, it's like, oh, stop telling them bullshit stories, and like puts a gun up, threatens him, and the other dude's like, I go wherever I please. Do you challenge that or whatever? And that was just so dumb. It was just so poorly written. This is like B movie schlock material here. It's just, the whole thing is terrible. So anyway, I'm done talking about this crap. My rating for Darkling out of 10 is a 1. The worst. As I said, there's only one scene that's decent, and it's not enough to even elevate this episode to a 2. So many things combined about this episode makes it absolutely terrible. The cheesy, handsome, stereotypical kind of character, and the slimy bartender, and then ruining Cass's character. This is the first episode where they really started to completely trash and ruin her character and make her all about sex appeal rather than the complex, intelligent, and interesting, intricate character that she used to be. And also at the same time, of course, the dumb, cheesy premise that they contrived premise that they try to get to create this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story that is topped with Robert Picardo's worst performance in his life. One of the worst performances I've ever seen. That is just beyond cliche, cheesy, and just schlock. This episode is schlock, yet it takes itself seriously. Anyway, that's it for my review of Darkling. I shall be back to cover many more episodes of Star Trek on my channel, as well as I cover other shows such as Star Wars, The Clone Wars, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks so much for watching.